So we walked towards the door thinking, oh, I don't know. And this lady squatted down with a beaming smile, shook my hand and said, I am so glad you're here.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Follow to Lead podcast, a Christian leaders podcast powered by EBEB Solutions, energy benefits for every business. Go to ebebsolutions.com today and get your free energy audit. It will literally save you time and money. Tell them Tony sent you. Well, friends, just one more episode in 2025 and then a trailer episode for 26. If you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, I apologize for the background. We're under construction in the home studio. I'm so excited to really lean in to what next year's podcast is going to be all about. The trailer episode will be sure to tell you more about that. Make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts. Today's episode, though, you're not going to want to sleep on. Today is Kristin Thomas Miller, and I have loved getting to know the Millers. They are incredible people, and they run an incredible program all about bringing young people into the church. In our dialogue today, we talk about her ministry called Leadership Pathway, and it's all about the next generation of leaders. We unpack why intentional development, mentorship, hands-on ministry experiences are essential for the long-term health of the church. Kristin shares her personal journey into leadership as well, and we talk about the vision behind launching Leadership Pathway, their latest book that came out, and why it all matters. If you're a leader at any level and you're thinking about the next generation, you're going to want to listen to this conversation. At the end, it really casts a hopeful vision for the future of the church, and it's going to give you some very practical guidance on how to raise up the next generation. Such a good dialogue. And hey, don't forget, now is the time to sign up for our email list. It's the best way to stay in tune with everything that's happening. Plus, in 2026, there's going to be some additional items that go along with the podcast that you're going to want to get your hands on. I'm very excited about what God is doing in and through this work. So now, a quick word from our partners, and here's my conversation with Kristin Thomas Miller. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited today to have my new friend, fellow Reds fan, Kristin Miller. Kristin, welcome to the podcast.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I always adore a Reds fan. So
you know why? Because we have a special place in heaven. It's like masochism, right? We just enjoy the pain. What was your highlight? What was your highlight from 2025?
Related to the Reds or just?
Yeah, Reds. Yeah, obviously we're going to start with the Reds. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, we happen to be at the series towards, not quite at the postseason, but towards the postseason when they played the 4-game series against the Cubs. And we were there for 2 of the games, and it was just spectacular. Winning, celebrating afterward, like just so unexpected. We didn't think it was going to happen. And so, yeah, I always enjoy winning against the Cubs. If it ever possible.
If it's ever possible. And as we record this, we're getting ready, have started the World Series. Who you like in the series? You like the Dodgers? You like the Blue Jays? Who you got?
Yeah, I was really hoping for the Mariners to go through. So I think I'm rooting for the Blue Jays.
Yeah. A buddy of mine who is a fellow disciple maker, he is rooting for the Dodgers because he's trying to prove to Major League Baseball how broken the system is.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That is.
And so I'm like, I don't think they care about your feelings, Justin, but I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So let's jump into a little bit of your work. You do a lot of things. You're an author. You're a coach. You run an organization called Leadership Pathway. That really helps align the next generation with churches and places that are trying to give them a seat at the table. So let me ask you this, from a macro perspective, how would you define the calling that God has placed on your life?
Wow. Yeah. The calling of my life. Well, honestly, I don't know if I can, if you would allow this, it traces back to when I first met Jesus.
Love it.
So yeah, my origin in Christ then led to my calling. Basically, I was 9 years old when my family first walked into a church. And previous to that time, we really were a family far from God. My mom still suffers from pretty chronic mental illness. And my dad was pretty checked out. And I just remember being one of two kids, just feeling immense loneliness. My parents didn't have the energy to really pay attention. And anyone else that did get attention other than my mom, it was my brother, because he was charming and getting in trouble, And so, yeah, at a young age, I just felt this chasm of like, does anybody care? Does anyone see me? And so we had an opportunity through some incidences that happened with my mom's illness that we decided we were going to check out a church. And back in those days, Google was the yellow pages. And so I literally remember my parents scanning, scrolling down, name by name and deciding, okay, this is where we're going to go. And when we drove up, there was this great divide between our car and the front door. And as a kid, I'd never been there. I didn't know who Jesus was. I didn't know somebody could hear my thoughts. I didn't know anything about that. But I kind of sensed like, I hope something beyond those doors is what I'm looking for. And so we walked towards the door thinking, I don't know. And this lady squatted down with a beaming smile, shook my hand and said, I am so glad you're here. And it is exactly what I needed, like all of us really. But for me in that moment, I didn't know what was going to happen. She led us to our seats. And I knew walking away from that day, like, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. And so my calling has really always been tied to that. Like, I definitely was a sponge. My whole family eventually accepted Christ. And I myself, my brother too, like we all served in ministry. And I felt regardless that nothing else mattered. Everything paled in comparison. And so my calling has always been, and I think this is tied to what I do now with Leadership Pathway, is ensuring people aren't overlooked. Whether it's wanting to go into ministry, whether it's finding the true hope, the only hope in Jesus, that's really been the draw for me. And and being a female leader, there's always incidences of that as well, feeling overlooked. And so that's kind of thematically been everything to me.
So beautifully stated. Thank you for being so vulnerable. I'm curious, how does one transition from that into like, hey, let's start an organization centered around stewarding the next generation of the church? It feels like such a big task that it could probably only be described as a calling. How do you decide that you're going to get into this? How does it get started? Give us kind of the genesis story of Leadership Pathway, because on the paper, it feels like one of those parables where you're like, I'm just throwing, one drop of water into the ocean kind of deal.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so true. Well, I think both my husband and I have been on staff at churches, and at times he's on staff and I'm supportive of him and vice versa. So our whole adult life, we have been in and around ministry. My husband also served for a time in staffing, specifically helping churches find pastors that are looking for a role at their church. And so I think just all the work that we've done with churches, there was always this nagging question, really kind of back to 2005, 2006. People would regularly ask, do you know someone? We're looking for a kids pastor. We're looking for a worship leader, a youth director. We just can't find them. Meanwhile, we were running up against some great talent. And somehow they were like, yeah, nobody's hiring. Nobody wants us. We don't have enough experience. And so it was kind of like this matchmaking effort to connect the two. And we had an opportunity in 2012 to help a small Christian college that was close to closing its doors, so we could come in and transform some things. And so really took a great effort to point exclusively to recruiting students for ministry, getting students submerged in churches for 2 years. This really became our impetus or incubator for what we do now. But basically, we had students that were 2 years on campus being actively and intentionally involved with the local churches. We had church leaders in that region that were active in providing a plan for those 2 years. Meanwhile, the next 2 years was go do online courses and then be submerged in a church, because there's something about having your foot in the door, being on the team, becoming known, having the longest job interview ever, but doing the work. And at the end of 2 years, if that church can't hire you, it's basically like, well, hopefully they'll have a raving testimonial review to reference to give you going elsewhere. But what we found in that 4-year time frame from 2012 to 2016 was that students were walking across the stage with their diploma with multiple job offers. They were actually going into ministry, not floundering, because they'd already been doing the work for 2 years. So after that, we moved to Denver. I started working full time at a church, but Leadership Pathway began. And my husband always says, like, he's tried forever to like pitch it to other people to do. And every time it was always this thing, this is a great idea. We need it. The church needs it. We need next leaders prepared because there aren't enough quality people going into ministry. You should do it. It was just one of those things that was like passed back to him and to us. And Leadership Pathway began officially in 2017. Like I said, I was working on staff and it started to grow. And in 2019, I went full time, beginning the coaching area, coaching leaders who then have residents. So it's just one of those things that piles on over time.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I have is I know that there are a lot of leaders who are listening who are like, this feels like it should be easier, right? Because we all understand the Great Commission, to go therefore and make disciples. We should have our own version of apprenticeship, right? We should have people who are coming up. And yet you guys both worked on ministry staffs. I've worked on ministry staff of big and medium-sized churches, small churches. What is it about ministry that all of a sudden makes it so much harder to bring up the next generation? And how can the leaders who are listening, who are mostly secular leaders, how can we begin to start leaning into changing that narrative?
Yeah. Well, most of us could probably attest to the fact that first and foremost, we weren't formally developed. Most of us did do the old school way of jumping into the deep end or being pushed into the deep end and had to start swimming, maybe treading water at first and then develop into a swimming stroke. Meanwhile, we could probably also attest on the other hand that our peers didn't necessarily make that curve. They quickly went away, did something different. And so there was a lot more who didn't make it versus those that did. So many church leaders have learned how to do things. They've had to figure it out. And so there is a separation between bringing someone who's new saying, show me, to try to translate what's in your head, what you've learned over years time period, without having the bitterness to think like, hey, nobody showed me this. Why should I show you?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, you have to, like, if you could have had it done differently, would you have appreciated that? And I think if we really get honest with ourselves, we probably would have benefited. We would learn things sooner and not as hard, hopefully, or at least some of the harder blows that we had. Or maybe, I don't know. It's just one of those things where, like, we have an opportunity because we must. The future of the church is at stake if we don't engage the next generation, because we've got a number of people that are out of ministry or are soon to retire, and we don't have the floodgates of people begging to come in, and we have to be very intentional about it. So how does a leader do it with the day-to-day pressure of 101 things on their list? It is a challenge. It really is. And from our perspective at Leadership Pathway, like, we come in hyper-focused on residency and on leadership development for the sake of, we don't want a church leader to have to reinvent the wheel and think, okay, this is one more thing I got to do. That's really what we try to. We try to support you with, here's what's worked, for the most part. And at the end of the day, everyone's unique, so there is still this sense of one size fits one. But here's the trend, here's the pattern, here are the tools, and we want to help support you in this effort so that you can, as a leader in the church, spend the time that you really don't have, I get it, but try to spend some time to just build rapport and relationships so you can speak into the daily tasks, the daily learnings that need to happen so that essentially they can become the next leader, the next, what we like to say as the next you.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about the language that you guys use around this process is that you draw a very clear line in the sand about the difference between succession and stewardship. And I love that idea. I think we need to be better stewards of a lot of different things. Drill down on that for me. Help me see, and all the people listening see, how is stewardship different than succession?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if I think like when I think of succession, it seems like, I don't know, maybe I'm thinking of even just reading this morning. I don't know if this totally applies, but I'm thinking of when we read Matthew 9 and we know that the fields are ready for harvest, but where are the workers? We ask the Lord of the harvest to send the workers. And when I read that verse, it's in this passage right before when Jesus is saying, the people need a shepherd. The sheep are missing the shepherd. And so there's this cry for workers. And I think succession, sometimes we look at, kind of a transactional type of process. And the stewardship is like, maybe God has already brought the workers. Your eyes are just not yet open to who's in front of you, who is right there that has the potential. They may doubt themselves. They may not even realize they have the potential. But you, as a leader in ministry, know what it takes. You should open your eyes and maybe take a chance to say, hey, would you consider? Because I do see this in you. To me, that's stewardship. That's like the talents that are in front of you. Don't bury it. Don't rely on someone else to come from elsewhere. I mean, of course, we're going to have leaders that go from different places, but there's a plethora of opportunities and resources and people right there in front of you. I do believe we just need the veil, the scales off our eyes.
One of the things about the book is that the subtitle is a call for 1,000 more churches to invest in Gen Z through residency. And I'm struck by that because I was thinking about 1,000 churches, and I was thinking about some of the small ones here in Southwest Ohio that are kind of like, I'm not sure that there's many young people left. And so how do we overcome the reality of, like, in the church world that I'm in, it feels like there's the cool, really awesome church that I just visited this weekend where there's 4,000 dudes going to man camp, right, on 800 acres of land. And then there's like the progressive euchre party happening at the other one, right? Like it's, look, and those are both real events that are not separated. They're 30 miles apart, right? How do we close the gap in those worlds?
Yeah. Well, there are young people. They might not be in droves, but I would also say sometimes it is a second career person in your church to consider. But for the few that are there, what can you do in a smaller church to recognize and take somebody under your wing? Because we tend to attract who we are. So if there's a few people that start meeting together in a small group, have them start inviting their friends. Meanwhile, one of the things that I would say for a smaller church is to take heart. There are things that a smaller church can offer a young leader wanting to go into ministry that a larger, cooler church, if you will, may not. Basically, I would say the smaller church has opportunities where you can experience multiple types of ministry. You get a broader scope. It's not as specialized. You get to try without feeling like, oh my goodness, this is too much at stake to have you up there doing this. Like sometimes you have a little bit more flexibility to try things than you would at a larger church. So what does that mean? As a leader of a smaller church, you too need to be watchful and invite people. Even start looking at your middle school crowd and your high school crowd. Can they start leading? Can a middle schooler be serving in kids ministry and a high schooler help out, be a buddy in middle school, to where there is some leadership development happening where maybe over the summer they're interning and then suddenly they've bitten the bug or they've got the bug to go into ministry, and you can start taking it from there.
I love that. Well, I think a lot of us forget that we could start. I think one of the things that you talk about in your process is we're creating a pathway.
Yeah.
And so it's quite possible that you don't have anybody because you've never created a pathway, right? And so talk to me about the importance of residency. It's very, very rare that I find someone who's like, hey, not only do we want you to have Gen Z, but we actually want you to have Gen Z in a space that provides community and corporate discernment, not just a job. So talk about that process.
Corporate discernment and not just a job. I think I'm not following you. I'm sorry, Tony.
No, it's the idea of residency, right? Where there's like, you're bringing people in, you're training them. There's like a dedicated pipeline. Like you're surrounding them with people the whole time. You guys are a part of the process. The church is a part of the process. And so when I say corporate discernment, what I mean is like, there's voices on every side of this dialogue as you create a pipeline that builds through community.
Yes. Yeah. Well, one of the things that we try to point to, the idea of residency really comes, at least for us, came from the idea of the hospital medical community. Resident, often in medical terms, is following behind the surgeon or the doctor. And they're watching and then doing, and then they're supposed to teach it and to someone else, to a peer or whomever. And so that teaching model should also apply to the church. There's this infectious culture that needs to happen, right? When you bring one person on, and we do advise, like if you're just starting off, just start with one.
Yeah.
Although I think a lot of times we like to think we want to create this big program so there's multiple young people so they can have fun and, encourage one another. And that's great, but there's something special about being one, because that one person, as you're trying to cast this vision to your church, to your community, you start to get buy-in from not only the person that's directly overseeing that resident, but maybe there's a host home person who's like a family that's taking this young person under their wing. Maybe there's multiple families. There's fellow students that like look up to this resident. You start to see an elder be intrigued and wanting to learn more. So what happens with this community is that people are able to speak into and influence and get excited about this new person going into ministry, even when they don't realize what's happening. Meanwhile, there are others around that are starting to think, maybe I want to do that someday. And so there's like a multiplicative impact that can happen. And so if you bring on the next one or a couple more, that first resident can oftentimes be the sophomore also leading. So it's like you grow in leadership. So more leadership is happening, not just for that one individual.
A lot of the people that listen to this podcast are not in vocational ministry, but are on the boards. They're on they're active in the church. They're leading outside of, traditional ministry ways. Mm-hmm. What is their role in creating that residency program? What's their role in shepherding in the next generation of leaders?
Well, first of all, I think we got to think about this in all industries on some level. We're hurting for the next gen everywhere, and if biggest thing of all is that they are looking for older people to mentor them, to develop them. And that's on every level. Again, we have to put aside our bias, how things were done our way, how we had to figure it out. They're leaning in and they have things to share with us that we could benefit from likewise, And I think we forget that it's a two-way street. For those that are listening who are active in their church and want to have an involvement in some way, you have skills that are beneficial. One of the things that we are trying to encourage leaders is to not bear the full weight of this development, because oftentimes you're having to wear a boss hat, a friend hat. Sometimes it's a counselor hat. And we don't encourage that too long. Go to the professionals. And somebody in the church might actually have that to offer specifically. There are others who have savviness with finances. So teach a young person how to budget personally. Get ready. Because one of the things that we find more and more is just adulting is a thing. There is, when we consider the pandemic and how young people kind of missed being in school physically and being able to learn how to talk to people with eye contact in a way that you don't necessarily get on social media or online. There are just some things that feel like they might have missed those EQ kinds of qualities that they're eager to learn, even if their body language shows otherwise. But the only way we can do that to pour into someone is to establish that relationship. We have to take time to build that rapport and have a conversation, get to know them before you have, the ability to want to speak truth. You got to have the trust initially.
Oh, that's real wise. In order to speak truth, you have to have the trust. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about how we begin to develop friendships with someone who feels like they're in a completely different foreign generation.
Yeah.
Right. What's that look like in your life? How are you developing those next generation relationships when it's like, my kids walk around right now all day and just say 6, 7, like it's,
yes.
I'm supposed to know what that means. And we do now, but like, right. We just give it back to them and kind of joke around. But, we're not working together. They're my kids, right? I just boss them around anyway. So like in love, in grace.
Yes.
But how do we develop that relationship with someone who feels so different?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, just like I would tell a young person that they need to find commonality with someone who's older, someone who's not in their socioeconomic classification or familiarity. I would say the same for an older person. Like we have a lot more in common than we realize, And I think, first of all, making time to be curious, asking questions and answering with questions to keep learning more about them. And we might in those moments find that we have some common ground that just breeds engagement. And then the other thing I would say, Tony, is I like to say there needs to be an appropriate level of vulnerability. And when I say that, like, you don't need to disclose everything, of course, but there needs to be something that like says, I'm going to get real with you. And so like, here's what's going on, like for instance, I've had a bad day. I've got a lot on my plate. I'm not managing my time well. I wish I was, just talk about today and not 20 years ago in that regard. Like when I was your age, blah, 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 no, talk about today. I have real struggles. And I think that open honesty is where it breaks that veneer of you versus me, us versus them. It's like, no, we have this common bond and we can find something worthy to mutually encourage one another. It's actually kind of scriptural. Old men help young men, old women help young women help old women. Like it's just, we're supposed to encourage and support one another. And the same goes in this situation.
I love it. And I think you're right. I think it goes, hand in glove with disciple making. I think it goes with the idea of spiritual generations. One of the hard parts about this kind of idea is that it requires churches to be open-handed, meaning that we're going to bring them in and we're going to send them out and we're going to let, because when you're young, the reality is your life feels and is a lot less stable than it is when you're in your 40s or 50s. How do we begin to influence culture in churches so that there could be acceptance of the differences?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, I don't know, maybe I should just speak to my own personal experience. I'm a big fan of leading a small group, single gender. That's really more my jam versus mixed couples. And lately, we just recently moved back to Denver, but we were in Tacoma, Washington for 4 years, and I led a group of women. And there's such beauty of having a 24-year-old, 26, 28, 42, 38, 65, almost 70, like, we had so many different ages in that group, and it was like we were the same, and we bore one another's burdens. We were there for someone who just got married later in life and someone who got a new job. And I think we got to model this, make this more normal. I think like when we look at a young person who comes out of college or, does a gap year and then wants to go into ministry, like they've only been around people their own age. Wow. And it's a big jump to suddenly feel like I'm supposed to help someone who's 10, 15, 20 years older than me. How do I do that? I don't, and I think we have to normalize it from day one if we can, which I know is way easier to say than do, of course. But
of course, right? But it's important, right? And it's one of those things where it's like, I think this is an important time to think also about the consequence, right? If we don't start doing that, from your expert opinion, as someone who's studying this and looking at churches and looking at the landscape, what's the consequence if we don't start having churches invest in the next generation?
yeah, well, there are going to be a number of churches closing. So more of a desert than ever. We're going to have, we're going to have churches that that might be thriving, but it's not meeting everyone's unique. Like I live in a part of the country right now where, like I said, we just moved back, and it's been hard to find a church. And I think we found one. So, but still, like, just the whole idea is, like, if we don't invest in the next generation, there will be no more pastors to lead our kids, our grandkids, ourselves. We don't have an option. And this was God's plan A, the church. It's still fractured. It's still made of humans who are going to make mistakes. But this is his plan, to share who Jesus is, to spread the gospel. And so we have to invest in the next generation. It's just a non-negotiable. I don't know what else to say.
That's great. No, I love it. I love it. I love the passion. One of the things that I'm excited about is this latest book that you've written, Who's the Next You? You wrote it with your husband. I'm always curious when two creative people, I've had the opportunity to be on your guys' podcast and have chatted with your husband. He's a phenomenal human. Yeah. You're a phenomenal human. What was it like writing a book with your spouse? Because I know a lot of people who are type A who are like, meh, not going to do it. What was the creative process like for you two?
So we have been known to use, those large Post-its that fit on the wall.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Our downstairs had large Post-its everywhere on the wall for a time. And we were trying to organize, okay, this is chapter 1, chapter 3. And so, yeah, it's a little nutty. For any of you that know about the Enneagram, it just turns out that both of us are Enneagram 3s. So we like to work. And so we do blend work a little too much into the personal life. And so, yeah, it was a little nutty, but still kind of invigorating and exciting just the same to think, maybe more people can read this, get a better sense or an overview of what this could be. So that's what it was.
Our community loves to pray. What's the prayer that's associated with this book as it gets out into the wilderness?
Yeah, it's about having eyes to see and hands and feet to do and a heart that's open, and God, open our minds. Let's not put this on someone else. We all can actively be a part of God's plan in this story, in the plan that he still has for the church and for our world today until we're all together in eternity. But, this eternity is in the balance for so many people, and we need leaders in the church to help pave the way, as well as leaders in the marketplace. And we need to be united in this God that brings hope to a lonely little girl and a confused dad and a mom who's sick and, all of these things. Nothing else matters but knowing Christ. And so Who's the Next You is about thinking this is not our life to live. We're living here to worship our Lord and to point others to him. So that's my prayer, is that sorry, that was a lengthy thought.
I love it. This is the advantage of long form format.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's good. Okay, I have one more question for you, but before I ask it, I know that the bold ones are going to want to find you all over the interwebs. Where is the best place to learn all things Kristin and Leadership Pathway?
Okay. Yeah. Our website, leadershippathway.org. So that is 2 P's. So leadershippathway.org. So you can learn about what we do, our team. And if I could say, our book also is found on Amazon. Who's the Next You? That's an apostrophe S, WHO apostrophe S. Who's the Next You? And we'll link to all that in the show notes for sure. And be sure to pick up your copy. And the last question I love to ask people, it's an advice question.
I'm going to invite you to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, but I get to name the season of life that you're in.
Okay.
I want to take you back to the end of your very first day on staff at Leadership Pathway. You've just kind of gone full time into this deal. You've kind of watched as an outsider as your husband started it, and now you're in it and you guys are building it together, and you go home from work, which is probably still in the same place where you actually worked at. But like, you're just kind of like, you're just saying, okay, day one in the books. If you could go back in time and sit knee to knee with that younger version of yourself, hold her hands, look her in the eye, and give her one piece of advice about the journey she's going to go on, what would you tell her?
I would tell her, keep at it because this matters. I felt very disappointed to have to step off staff. I wanted to continue in ministry. That's all I ever really wanted to do. And when I needed to step into this role, it needed a lot of attention, and I was figuring it out. And I was talking to, as you might imagine, no offense, Tony, but I was talking to a lot of men who didn't really want to listen to advice from a female. And so I had to keep at it. And it really does matter. I see that now already. So.
Amen.
Yeah.
Kristin, thank you so much for the time today. Thank you for your generosity and for what you're doing to build the next generation of leaders. I think it's so important. So thank you for your work.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
Hey friends, welcome to the 3 and 5, 3 practical takeaways in 5 minutes or left. Number 1, create intentional pathways for young leaders. Don't wait for leaders to emerge. Give them a path to on-ramp to. Give experiences, get opportunities, as Kara Powell says, and then the keys. Number 2, bridge generational gaps through relationships, not assumption. That's right. If you want to get to know the next generation, spend time with them, listen to them, hear them, have meaningful conversations. And number 3, invest early, often, and personally. This is a one-on-one kind of game. And the future of the church and your business, it depends on you prioritizing mentorship and pouring into people, developing healthy leaders. You have to do it. There's no one else. We can't offload this onto a spreadsheet. It's relational. It requires you. All right, here are the 3 actionable takeaways. Number 1, create intentional path for young leaders. Number 2, bridge generational gaps through relationships, not assumptions. And number 3, invest early, often, and personally. Friends, thank you for making it to the end of today's episode. You're one of the bold ones. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hit me up on Instagram at twmilt or email me tony@twmilt.com. And don't forget, now is the time to sign up for our email list so you can get all of the resources that we're going to be putting out with next year's episodes. There's a link in the show notes, or you can go to twmilt.com and get signed up today. Until next time, thank you so much for being here, for being one of the bold ones. And remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.